Sorry, we left off last time in the middle of what I was saying there. Sorry. We were talking about metaphors, and this classic metaphor from Kate Chopin's The Awakening. The bird that would soar above the level plane of tradition and prejudice must have strong wings, right? There are a lot of other examples of metaphors here. Okay, imagery. Now we look at imagery. We're talking about objects, figurative language that represents objects, actions, and ideas that appeal to our physical senses. These things are things you can build paragraphs off of in a literary analysis essay. You could build a paragraph off of imagery. Actually, this section of the lecture is pretty cool. I mean, I could obviously expand it more, but I used some imagery from two different Cormac McCarthy novels. He's just a brilliant author. And setting as well. This is a good thing to build a paragraph off of. Like it talks about here, the setting is where it takes place, but the setting provides a backdrop to the story and helps create the mood, right? I think about the setting of any story and how significant it is, right? Moby Dick or Hemingway's Old Man in the Sea, Jaws. So definitely think about the different settings in the novel that you're reading. Symbolism is a key thing to look for. We go over this in the visual. We don't do visual text in this class. Let's see. Symbolism is basically when something stands for something else. So, like light represents intelligence, reality, goodness, transcendence. Darkness represents things like misfortune or bad judgment. Blue represents the intellect and cool reflective ability, like Captain America or Dr. Spock have. In symbolism, let's see, we're looking at brown here, can mean spiritual death. Gray is symbolic of death of the body while the soul remains eternal. Actually, I know that this is a reference I made that I'm familiar with. One that I maybe should replace this with is, of course, everyone knows the Terminator now. He's made so many movies and was the governor of California. But also, think of Kurt Russell in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, that long gray beard of his. Okay, we'll skip through some of these other symbols, and then basically when you get to the end here, you're thinking about, make sure that you have a central thesis that tells us what this work means, and that the literary devices that you look at help to communicate exactly what you talk about in your thesis. And just think, whenever you're writing these essays, the answer is in the text, right? The images, the dialogue, the plot. Use the text as your main source. Use an additional source to help you expand your analysis. And here we'll take a look at the post-colonial section of this lecture, because both of these novels are technically, I would say, post-colonial. Certainly the first one is, the Barbadian In the Castle of My Skin by George Lamming. That country had been at one point enslaved. His ancestors were enslaved, and they are not anymore. They are in a post-colonial world. The always running, there's a slightly different explanation, but there's a similar perspective of the post-colonial reality that he sits in. He says it takes a scientific approach to uncover the source of exploitation, to unravel society's delicate and intricate tapestry stitched with the skin of our mothers, the bones of our ancestors, the blood of all who toil. That's a good way to think about what post-colonialism is about. In a quick and easy sense, post-colonialism refers to the literature of any country that was once enslaved. And, you know, by 1914, that was roughly 85% of the planet Earth. So most countries have post-colonial literature and post-colonial stories to tell. And a lot of post-colonial work is a response to the Enlightenment, which was this period of time, the European intellectual movement in the 17th and 18th century, where philosophers and writers were concerned with God and reason and nature and all these, you know, really advanced philosophical concepts, while at the same time, these countries, mainly referring to England, that were both producing these interesting theories, were also enslaving human beings. So that gave post-colonialism kind of a goal, right? Their goal became then the unmasking of Enlightenment as not just this period of wonderful, fantastic, creative ideas about law and God and reason, but what is it really, right? It is a dichotomy of that is going on, while at the same time we have the enslavement, the murder, the brutal oppression of other human beings. So, like Said talks about, the notion of unmasking the Enlightenment became kind of a goal. That's why you see in a lot of post-colonial work retellings of original works, like Shakespeare's Tempest was made into George Lamming's Water with Berries, and also Amy Cesar's A Tempest. Both of those are really excellent. I would recommend them. And then this goes on to talk about some of the seminal works, right? If you're interested in post-colonial theory, the places to start would be Frantz Fanon, Michel Foucault, and Edward Said. Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. So I think where I started, that was the first one I think I read. That was really enlightening. Much of the work of Michel Foucault, he has got a number of excellent works. And then Orientalism. I would actually suggest you start with Said, the work of Edward Said, either Orientalism or Cultural and Imperialism. Those are kind of the classic entries to this subject matter. And they're really good. They're really interesting to read. This part talks about, I would reference this part if you're studying in the Castle of My Skin. I'm not going to go over it right here in the lecture, but it talks about the psychological perspective of the West Indians here. Talks about their identity, this whole idea of having a dual, fluctuating, or divided identity is a very central theme to a lot of post-colonial literature. And then this gives you some examples of the great West Indian authors. This is the first wave: Claude McKay, C.L.R. James, Frank Collymore, and they're all important. The second wave of West Indian authors, included Savan, Lamming, Walcott, Brathwaite, Nepal, Kincaid. I recommend them all. I can't really, I couldn't really choose between any of them. They're all really excellent authors. I would recommend you read at least one by each of them. And then we have some classic post-colonial novels: Heart of Darkness, Achube's Things Fall Apart, right? Classic Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. And this section here is more helpful to the free write. I usually bring this up when we look at the Linton Kwesi Johnson poem. So I'm not going to read this here, but maybe I'll make reference to it when we do the free write. It talks about the waves of immigration. Actually, this relates to the Linton Kwesi Johnson piece most of all. So we'll touch on it, I guess, during that when we look at the free write. These last couple terms here are for In the Castle of My Skin. There is example of Carnivalesque there, the gaze, the panopticon, all these literary and philosophical terms. You do see examples of those in The Castle of My Skin. So look for those. And that will basically wrap us up. And if you're looking for references, they're always at the end, the works cited page, or sometimes when the works cited page gets extremely full, I will start adding notes like this one here, like this very interesting quote about the West Indian, like the oppression of the West Indian people. This is from the introduction of In the Castle of My Skin. There's the page. All right, so I hope this is helpful. Let me know if you have any questions about writing a paper where you're analyzing either In the Castle of My Skin by George Lamming or Always Running by Luis J. Rodriguez. Remember, there are numerous options. You could do a literary analysis, which is basically, what does this novel or memoir mean? You could do a rhetorical analysis, which essentially is, what types of rhetorical strategies does this author use to communicate their message or main idea or main point? And then there are several other options that deal with critical thinking, right? How or where do we see certain characters in the novels or the memoir using critical thinking strategies? Okay, so that should basically wrap it up. Let me know if you have any questions about these types of essays.